Blessed is the man who walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is on the law of the Lord, and on his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Welcome to the Bread of the Word podcast, a podcast striving to feast on God's Word and let the Bible speak to us all. Let us, as a former generation said, go ad fontes to the fountain and be nourished and sustained by all that God is. Let's dig in together. Hello, and welcome back to the Bread of the Word podcast, where we go ad fontes to the fountain, to the Word of God, to be nourished and sustained by all that God is, as He's revealed Himself to us. My name is Tyler. We are continuing our trek through the book of Job. We've come to chapter 30. This has been 2.5 years of the making, and we're coming to the tail end of the book. It has been a ride for me. I'm sure it's been a ride for you, but we are actually coming to Job's final remarks. Between this and the subsequent verses we'll cover in later weeks, Job is done talking by chapter 31. As far as Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar are concerned, Job finishes his speeches in chapter 31. In chapter 32, we're introduced to Eliphud, really interesting character. I'm looking forward to digging into that one. And then in chapter 38, God speaks to Job in the whirlwind. And so we're coming to the tail, and this is like the last remarks. This is the closing statements from Job concerning the suffering that he's endured. And I think it's safe to say he probably pulls out the hottest fire for right here, because he's very honest. He's very blatant. He's very in your face. He holds nothing back here. But reading the first 16 verses, these are the words of God. But now they that are younger than I have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. Yea, whereto might the strength of their hands profit me, in whom old age was perished. For want and famine they were solitary, fleeing to the wilderness, in former time desolate and waste, who cut up mallows by the bushes and juniper roots for their meat. They were driven forth from among men. They cried after them as after a thief, to dwell in the cliffs of the valleys, in caves of the earth, and in the rocks. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they were gathered together. And they were children of fools, yea, children of base men. They were viler than the earth. And now I am their song. I am their byword. They abhor me. They flee far from me, and spare not to spit in my face. Because he hath loosed my cord, and afflicted me, they have also let loose the bridle before me. Upon my right hand rise the youth. They push away my feet. They raise up against me the ways of their destruction. They mar my path. They set forward my calamity. They have no helper. They came upon me as a wide breaking in waters, as a wide breaking in of waters. In the desolation they rolled themselves upon me. Terrors turned upon me. They pursue my soul as the wind, and my welfare passeth away as a cloud. And now my soul is poured out upon me. The days of affliction have taken hold of me. As has been the case with much of Job, this is not a wedding passage. This is not a happy time. This is not something we read that we come away feeling very encouraged, very refreshed. This is hard. And that's been the case with this whole book, honestly. It's hard. This is where theology gets hard. But just to kind of bridge the gap between where we were and where we are, we were in chapter 29, where Job was lamenting the blessings he's had in the past, where the light of God's providence was very clearly upon him. when he was walking in wisdom, and people saw him walking in wisdom, and they delighted in his wisdom, that they very much benefited from and profited by his wisdom. That he was a father to the poor. He broke the jaws of the wicked. That he was doing all these things, and people liked it. And that people delighted in his wisdom. And now he says that those same people, they that are younger than I, have me in derision. This transition, that when the suffering came, these people became instruments of his suffering. And that's been the case throughout Job. That when we open up in the book of Job, we have one adversary, Satan. We have one adversary. And as this book has unfolded, Job has found that he has many adversaries. He has many accusers. It started with Satan and his wife, who said, "Curse God and die." And then we have Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, who also set themselves up as accusers. And that's 5 right there. And then we add in all these anonymous people from the town, that we add in basically the townsfolk as accusers and murmurers and all of this, that they have become opposed to Job. They have delighted in his suffering to some sense, that he has become their song. I am their byword. They flee far from me and spare not to spit in my face. That is a rough transition for any person to make, let alone Job. That is a transition we don't wish upon others. And while we may not suffer in the way that Job does, many of us can, in some sense, relate to what he's describing, that the people that were willing to gather around you when you had things to bring to the table, as soon as you need something or you're in the pit, they scatter. But it's not just that they scattered for Job, it's that they scattered, and when they did interact with him, it was at spite. It was mockery. They very much became his enemies in some sense. Not unlike what we see with his wife, what we see with his friends, that everyone has turned against Job. Everyone has ceased to be in his corner. And this is something that we see in the Psalms quite a bit as well. If we look at Psalm 3, we find a similar predicament with David. And so David prays. This is when he flees from Absalom, his son. And so he's in the pit. Metaphorically speaking, he's in the pit, but realistically, he's in a cave. But he's on the run from his son, which is likely something that, realistically, we could make the case that God raised up Absalom as a result of David's wickedness. This is in the aftermath of David and Bathsheba. This is sometime after. But things kind of went downhill for David in a lot of ways after the thing with Uriah and Bathsheba. And Absalom, not exactly a good guy, and caused a lot of problems for David. And this is a psalm that David prays as he is hiding from his son. He says, "Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter up of mine head. I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. I laid down and slept, and I awaked, for the Lord sustained me." Even though David's hiding, he looks to God. Even though David is in despair, he turns to God. Even though everyone has forsaken him, he turns to God. And likewise, what we have in Job is that everyone has left but God. As Job has suffered, as Job has endured great tribulation, one of the things that we've seen take shape is that Job has no one but God. That all the comfort zones are gone. All the coping mechanisms have been taken away. He loses his family. He loses his home. He loses his wealth. He loses his health. He has nothing but God. And what we see through the betrayal of the townsfolk is just a further testament to that, of what we see in Psalm 73, whom have I in heaven but thee? There is none that I desire before thee. And so Job looks at the townsfolk, the people that he poured into, people that he was of great use to, and says, I have become their song, that they abhor me, they spare not to spit in my face. It's very much like what we see from the Psalms of David about the enemies of the righteous. And they mock him, they ridicule him. And all this prefigures what we'll see with Christ on the cross. That what ultimately this kind of harkens back to the Psalms, to the Old Testament poetry, that these are foreshadowings of Christ in the suffering and the humiliation of Christ on the cross. But as far as practically, Job has nowhere to look but God. But then we get to verse 11, and he says, He hath loosed my cord and afflicted me. Speaking of God. And this is the tension that we've been working through all through the book of Job. And we're going to continue to grapple with this tension, that Job has no one but God because of his suffering, but he is suffering because of God. And we can debate vernacular and get really nitpicky in the details, because yes, Satan was the accuser and Satan has technically done these things, but it was God who turned to Satan and said, He is in thy power. That however we work through the causes and the causation, and however we want to rationalize that in our head, God is involved in this. So much so that we're told in the scriptures that God afflicted Job. And so we have this tension where Job has nowhere to turn but God is the reason that he is suffering. It is ultimately the will of God that he has been afflicted and crushed. And yet there is nowhere else for him to turn but God. That is a hard place to be. This is part of why theology matters. This is where how we approach God matters. Because how do you approach God when we suffer? How do we approach God in the midst of suffering, in the midst of hardships, knowing that God is sovereign and has been pleased to permit those things to be, to bring that into being, that we suffer? Okay, we look at Romans 8. We look at Romans 8, verse 12. Therefore, brethren, we are debtors not to the flesh, to live after the flesh. For if ye live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. That there is union with God through Christ. That part of what Christ has accomplished on the cross, through the shames, through the humiliation, through the death, and through his resurrection, has been to make us to stand in the fold of God. To give us the Spirit, whereby we are adopted as the sons of God. And the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are, it says, the children of God. And this is where the wrench comes in. Verse 17, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. All this good stuff. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. And we look at that in modern America and we go, what? We're united with Christ so that we can suffer with Christ? That doesn't compute in our minds. And yet, this is what we have. Is we have union with Christ in his life, in his death, and in his resurrection. The reality that we suffer as the children of God is undergirded by the reality that there is not a place we can go where God is not with us. There is not a thing we can do where God is not witness. And so being united with Christ, it doesn't remove suffering entirely, but it changes the way that we do suffer. It changes the way that we navigate the suffering. That we do not suffer as people without hope, but we suffer as children who know who our Father is. And the tension in Job is, how do we suffer well? How do we suffer for God? In the fold of God, what is the way that we suffer? And as we've dealt with this, we've seen him talk about the townsfolk, about how they unbridled, they loosed their bridle. That just as the Lord hath loosed my cord and afflicted me, they also have let loose the bridle before me. And we look at James, and we have some similar language where he talks about the tongue as something very powerful, something potent. He says that the tongue he compares it to a bridle like that. He says, for in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, so that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which, though they be so great, are driven of force winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire. It's a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature. And it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beasts, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea, is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therefore bless we God, even the Father, and therefore curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not, and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. What does this have to do with Job? Two things. A, his friends were unbridled. That they were very much what James just described about the power of the tongue. is Job is already suffering, and everyone around him has proceeded to continue to cut him down. They have become, in some ways, instruments of Satan, that they have become sub-tier accusers and adversaries to Job. But on top of that, there's the idea that wisdom coming from above is pure, that the fruit of righteousness is peace. The thing about peace is that it implies that things aren't peaceful. Peace is not an absence of chaos. In order for there to be peace, there has to be something to have peace from. Hence, Jesus says to the storm, "Peace, be still." Psalm 46 says, "Be still and know that I am the Lord. I will be exalted among the heathen," says the Lord. How do we suffer well? We suffer as people that God grants peace. Because peace is the fruit of righteousness. This is why it says in the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." It's all in there. That if we are to be righteous people, if we are to be people that have been bestowed with the righteousness of Christ, then we are to become people of peace. And to be people of peace means going through some very unpeaceful things. Hence the call to make peace, to live peaceably among men, insofar as it depends on thee. And this is something that Job has been grappling with through this whole book, is that I'm suffering and I desire peace, but I do not have it. And so many times he said that maybe, I'm paraphrasing, maybe there will be peace when I die. And I am raised by God. When the worms destroy this body, and I shall, but my Redeemer liveth, and at the end he shall stand upon the earth. And I shall see it. I shall see him. But ultimately, how do we suffer? Even if we do not go to the extent that Job has, how do we suffer? We suffer as people that God is granting peace. Let's look at Psalm 16. Psalm 16 is another Psalm of David. It says, "Preserve me, O God, for in thee do I put my trust. O my soul, thou hast said unto the Lord, Thou art my God, my goodness extendeth not to thee, but to the saints that are in the earth, and to the excellent in whom is all my delight. Their sorrows shall be multiplied that hasten after another God. Their drink offerings of blood will I not offer, nor take up their names into my lips. The Lord is the portion of mine inheritance, and of my cup thou maintainest my lot. The lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places. Yea, I have a goodly heritage." This sounds all good and dandy. This is great. He says, I will bless the Lord, who hath given me counsel. My reins also instruct me in the night seasons. In the season of the night, my reins do me instruct. I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my glory rejoiceth. My flesh also shall rest in hope. For thou wilt not leave my soul in hell. That's a jump. How do we get from the start of this with thou art my Lord, my goodness extended not to thee, to you will not leave me in hell? How we get here? This is the Psalm. Neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. And this is ultimately a promise referring to Christ. That just as Christ was not permitted to see corruption, but was raised to newness of life by the Spirit of God, so God does not leave us in hell, does not allow us to see corruption, but we will be raised in Christ. We are united with Christ in life, in death, and in resurrection. He says, "Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore." And what the psalm shows time and time again is that the praises often come in the midst of hardship. That the deepest, most profound prayers to God often come from the pit, often come in the midst of suffering and hardship and difficulty. That we may grow closer to God realistically in the valley than we do on the mountain. And so as we look at Job and as we look at what he has endured, he says, "My soul is poured out upon me. The days of affliction have taken hold of me." It is here that we have none but God. It is here that we have nowhere to look but up. And so God works in us. Whatever the reason may be for the particular suffering we find ourselves in. Maybe it's not like Job, where the devil challenges God. That may not be my story. But ultimately, our God is in the business of turning suffering for good. Always has been. It says, what you intended for harm, God intended for good. That is Genesis 50:20. Romans 8:28, we know it so well that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purposes. There is nothing that will prevent God from accomplishing his will in you. Not suffering, not sickness, not death, not your sin, nothing. And so when we do suffer, we can suffer well because God is with us. When we are not suffering, God is with us. He meets us where we are, in sickness, in health, in life, and in death, in triumph, and in tribulation. God is with us. And we can say, as the psalmist does, "I bless the Lord because he doth by counsel me conduct. And in the season of the night, my reins do me instruct." This is our God. Call upon him. Commune with God, not just in the high points, but in the low points. Not just in the valley, but in the mountain. Commune with God. Get to know God. Because at the end of the day, we have nowhere to look but up. So let's look up. Thank you for listening. This has been the Bread of the Word podcast. Bread of the Word is a podcast ministry striving to feed people the wonderful words of God, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse, striving to let the Word speak for itself. This ministry is also a member of the Truth and Love Network, a diverse fellowship of fellow podcasts of different theological backgrounds, united in the gospel of God. For more from the Bread of the Word podcast or the Truth and Love Network, check out the links below and follow us on social media. Until next time, God bless. Matthew 4:4.